With the long history of professional wrestling, it's often hard to come up with brand new, original concepts. WWE has had the opportunity to be the flag bearer for different ways to present a pro wrestling match, and there has not been one more recent and popular than its Money in the Bank ladder match that debuted in 2005 at WrestleMania 21. Pardon the wrestling, but I am Bryan, and today we take a look back and a look forward at WWE Money in the Bank, including its premise, the pros and cons, and what we may expect at the 2023 edition. But before we get started, if you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to us for more content just like this. And hit the like button as well, as that is the easiest way for your fellow wrestling fans to find this video. And also be sure to follow us on Twitter for our live tweets and other thoughts about the world of professional wrestling at Pardon Wrestling. Money in the Bank, as we already mentioned, made its debut back in 2005 at the show of shows, WrestleMania. The premise of the Money in the Bank is simply a ladder match with multiple participants vying for a briefcase that is suspended above the ring. The winner of the briefcase receives a contract inside for World Championship opportunity at any time, any place that has to be redeemed within 1 year. Meaning the holder of the briefcase can announce ahead of time they are cashing in, most notably done by RVD against John Cena in 2006, or they can be opportunistic with their cash in. By its design, the Money in the Bank ladder match is a way to help push the next star to main event status. The cash-in isn't always successful, nor should it be, because there has to be a modicum of doubt when it does get cashed in, but that extra layer of excitement that gets put into play when the Money in the Bank is active on a member of the roster can create some amazing moments.
Ziggler, he's going to cash it in with the Bayley, the Money in the Bank contract. He's waited his time.
Ziggler is cashing in his Money in the Bank contract for the World Heavyweight Championship.
Money in the Bank was such a popular concept at its debut, it would eventually get its own premium live event, but we are getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Great ovation for Chris Jericho, the man that had the original idea for this ladder match.
Money in the Bank often credits its invention to the Ocho, Chris Jericho. But per Jericho himself, he said if it was a song, he co-wrote it with head writer of WWE at the time, Brian. Edge became the inaugural winner of Money in the Bank after outsmarting 5 other superstars and retrieved the briefcase. Fast forward nearly a year later at the New Year's Revolution pay-per-view in January, after going bell to bell in the Elimination Chamber, John Cena successfully retained his WWE Championship, a title which he had held up to that point since WrestleMania 21, the same show that Money in the Bank debuted. After that match, Vince McMahon walked out and announced that Edge was cashing in his Money in the Bank contract at that moment. And a couple minutes later,
He got him!
Edge as a main event star was truly born. Well, until Cena won the title back 3 weeks later. But on a serious note, winning Money in the Bank and going on to beat John Cena for the WWE Championship did help catapult Edge to a status he hasn't lost since, and that is be a top player for WWE. And that's exactly what the Money in the Bank match, much like the Royal Rumble before it, was designed to do. Bring main event status to one of the superstars of tomorrow. And yes, I'm not ignorant to the fact that solidified main eventers have won these matches as well, but by design, this is what it is meant to do. The following year, after a successful ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view, WWE was on the road to doing a second installment of the event, which would eventually lead to the creation of a third brand for WWE under the ECW banner. At WrestleMania 22 in Chicago, we saw Rob Van Dam become the second Mr. Money in the Bank, or first since that's kind of his thing. But nonetheless, unlike the winner before him, RVD would be the first Money in the Bank winner to announce his cash in ahead of time, and he did so at the aforementioned ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view. Of course, just like it was common in the mid-2000s, the current champion was John Cena. And the atmosphere and the match we would get at ECW One Night Stand 2006 is one for the ages and is absolutely worth going out of your way to witness. It's unlike anything you'll ever get a chance to see. At the following year at WrestleMania in Detroit, Mr. Kennedy would become the third winner of Money in the Bank, as at the time he was being primed for a main event run of his own. The increasing popularity of the man from
Green Bay, Wisconsin!
was hard to ignore. Well, that was until a triceps injury would throw plans out the window. In fact, the full story of Mr. Kennedy and the whirlwind of his booking probably would make a good full video, but the abridged version of it is this. Kennedy announced after winning the briefcase he would cash it in at WrestleMania next year. Between this promo and the following Raw, Kennedy suffered a legit injury to his triceps, one that was originally diagnosed as a tear, and with that, Vince McMahon and company decided it was best to have Kennedy drop the briefcase, which he did to Edge the following Raw. This was all made worse for Kennedy as the original diagnosis was incorrect, and instead of being out for several months, he would only miss a couple weeks. Regardless of the injury diagnosis, Edge would go on to win his second cash-in attempt against The Undertaker on the following SmackDown. WrestleMania 24 and 25 witnessed the first and only time someone not only won the Money in the Bank match in back-to-back attempts, but to this day is the only superstar to win it twice at all. And that was done by the straight-edge superstar, CM Punk. The booking of some people can make you question WWE, but it's hard to deny that CM Punk wasn't given many opportunities to succeed and do just that. Punk's first cash-in had a uniqueness to it since it hadn't been done at the time just yet. All three cash-ins up to this point involved a match in one way or another, whether it was immediately after a match or an announced cash-in ahead of time, but CM Punk's first cash-in came after Edge was attacked by Batista during a promo segment on Raw. It would be the first and only time Raw would see a cash-in during its first 7 years of existence. The following year, Punk would successfully cash in for a second straight year when, after a ladder match between Jeff Hardy and Edge, Punk would hit a couple go-to-sleeps on the Enigma for his second World Heavyweight Championship. Not bad for an indie darling after all. WrestleMania 26 would be the final time Money in the Bank would be held at a WrestleMania, and this year's event was won by Jack Swagger. There was a time where Swagger was being viewed as potential future main event talent. And while anyone that has watched Swagger in the ring and on the microphone over the course of his career can deduce why he might not be main event talent, there was a time in history where that potential was absolutely there. A legitimate amateur wrestler and a future MMA fighter, plus an incredible build, Swagger had the makings of that future potential. And it was no more apparent when he would at the time have the quickest cash-in when he cashed it in the same week on SmackDown against Chris Jericho, who was attacked by Edge just prior to the cash-in after Jericho had already been injured to this point. And a fun fact, after 6 straight years of existence, this would be the 6th and final time Edge would be involved in the Money in the Bank cash-in one way or the other. Here's a quick recap. He won the very first one, helped RVD win the second one against John Cena, won the third one after taking the briefcase from Mr. Kennedy, lost a championship to CM Punk in the fourth one, lost to Jeff Hardy before CM Punk would cash in after their ladder match in the fifth one, and then he attacked Chris Jericho just before Swagger would cash in on the sixth one. Like I said, Edge's rise to the main event happened because of Money in the Bank. A couple months later, due to the popularity of the Money in the Bank match and WWE's persistence at the time at having gimmick matches being the center point of pay-per-views, Money in the Bank would gain its own pay-per-view, or now known as Premium Live event to today's fans. Kane would be the winner of the inaugural event and would one-up Swagger from a year prior by becoming the quickest cash-in, as he would cash in later the same night against Rey Mysterio. However, this was also the first time WWE did 2 Money in the Bank matches in one night, as both SmackDown and Raw held their own version. During Raw's Money in the Bank, Miz would win the briefcase and would go on to win his first ever WWE Championship from Randy Orton following a successful defense against Wade Barrett on an episode of Raw. A post-match attack by the Nexus gave The Miz the opening to cash in. In 2011, I went to my first ever WWE event, and it was Money in the Bank in Chicago. 12 years later, people don't talk about this event for the titular matches, but for one of WWE's greatest matches of all time, John Cena vs. CM Punk for the WWE Championship. But prior to the main event, there were 2 Money in the Bank matches. Raw's briefcase was won by Alberto Del Rio in what is often considered one of the most overbooked summers in WWE history. I won't go over it all here, but Del Rio won the title at SummerSlam just a month after Punk's victory over Cena at Money in the Bank, when Kevin Nash came out and attacked Punk after his match with John Cena. The SmackDown side was won by Daniel Bryan, better known today by his real name, Bryan Danielson, and much like Kennedy years prior, made his intentions known that he would cash in at the following WrestleMania. After being involved in a feud alongside Mark Henry and Big Show, Bryan stated he wasn't sure he'd be able to keep that promise up with continued attacks from Mark Henry. At the TLC event in December, Bryan would cash in on Big Show after his match with Mark Henry and would become the first superstar to come through NXT to win a world title on the main roster. After 10 successful attempts, WWE fans would witness the first failed cash-in, and ironically enough, that belonged to John Cena. Cena winning the briefcase itself has become a meme nowadays, but it did lead to the second only time a cash-in was announced ahead of time. For the first time in over 6 years since RVD did it, Cena made his intentions known that he was challenging CM Punk for the championship at Raw 1000. And while Cena actually won the match, he did so via disqualification thanks to Big Show's interference, which means the title did not change hands. On SmackDown, Ziggler won the briefcase and had quite possibly one of the largest crowd reactions for a cash-in when he did it the Raw after WrestleMania on the then World Heavyweight Champion Alberto Del Rio. Swagger beat down Del Rio after the match, and the crowd was coming to a fever pitch just before Ziggler's music hit. Ziggler at the time was the guy people wanted to see in the main event scene, and they're finally getting it, and it culminated in one of the best moments on Raw in quite some time to that point. 2013 saw Randy Orton and Damien Sandow win the briefcases for SmackDown and Raw respectively, and by my count is the first time one superstar was involved in both cash-ins. Let's start with Orton's. SummerSlam would become the first premium live event to have a second cash-in, as Orton cashed in on Daniel Bryan after Bryan defeated John Cena. There were some additional shenanigans from Triple H, who was involved in the Cena-Bryan match as the referee, but nonetheless, Orton would end Bryan's first ever WWE Championship reign in mere minutes. This would be the quickest first WWE Championship reign since Yokozuna's back at WrestleMania 9. As for Raw's briefcase, Damien Sandow had the unfortunate task of being matched up with John Cena during a time when losing was a rarity for him. Sandow would interrupt a Cena promo, and for the first time ever at this point, the briefcase winner would attack the person they would cash in on prior to challenging for the title. Sandow was viewed as a cult favorite at the time, and becoming the first ever person to lose their cash-in match was and still is viewed as an incredibly unpopular move. But after going 13-0 with 12 successful cash-ins, Money in the Bank winners would suffer their very first loss. 2014 saw the return of just one Money in the Bank match, as the brand split was on again, off again at the time, and we would see Seth Rollins win this year's event. And for the first time in its near 10-year history, the briefcase would be cashed in at a WrestleMania.
Ladies and gentlemen, Seth Rollins is cashing in his Money in the Bank. Therefore, this will now be a triple threat match.
A triple threat match. Reigns with a spear. A wicked spear. Curb stop by Reigns. Cover by Rollins. Rollins with the title. Rollins with the title. Wait a minute. Rollins with the heist of the century. Brilliant.
And not only that, but this was the very first time a match was actually in progress during a cash-in, as Rollins cashed in during the Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns main event. This provided one of the most memorable finishes in WrestleMania history and one of Michael Cole's greatest calls by calling this the heist of the century. The Shield was a dominant force throughout the mid-2010s, as they were involved in one way or another in 3 straight cash-ins. In 2015, we saw the second year they were involved in it. Sheamus had won the briefcase, and like the year before, Roman Reigns was on the receiving end of a cash-in, and Sheamus would bro kick his way to the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. And this was the first time the same person was cashed in on in consecutive years. At the 2016 Money in the Bank event, Dean Ambrose would become the second member of the Shield to win the briefcase. Ambrose has the second quickest cash in on the men's side at 57 minutes, but he would cash it in on his former Shield partner Seth Rollins. Seth had just defeated Roman Reigns in the main event before Dirty Deeds would bring the title to Ambrose. This would mark the 3rd straight year that Reigns was involved in a cash-in as well. 2017 would see the return of a second Money in the Bank match, as women were finally given their chance to shine. But before we get there, 2017 would give us our second outright loss in a cash-in when Baron Corbin attempted to cash in on then WWE Champion Jinder Mahal. The cash-in attempt was on an episode of SmackDown for the first time in over 7 years, and would result in John Cena being involved in all 3 unsuccessful cash-ins. On the women's side, Carmella would be the first winner of the women's Money in the Bank match after an assist from James Ellsworth. The following SmackDown would see this match get a do-over, but Carmella would win it yet again. She would go on to hold the briefcase for the longest time in WWE history at an official 287 days. She successfully cashed in shortly after WrestleMania 34 on an episode of SmackDown against Charlotte Flair. 2018 would see the start of a trend for the women, and that would be the immediate cash-in. Alexa Bliss won the second women's Money in the Bank match and would cash in later that night against Nia Jax. It was similar to Seth's cash-in, where she interrupted a match, and it would be the first time the preceding match would be ended by a result of DQ, and then followed by that same person cashing in. Over on the men's side, Braun Strowman won the briefcase and had a very interesting run-up to his eventual cash-in. Just before Lesnar and Reigns were set to compete for the Universal Championship, Strowman came out and announced he was cashing in on whoever would win that match at SummerSlam. Strowman would eventually get taken out before the end of the night and would never cash in that night. So the next night on Raw, he would attempt to do it on Reigns after his match with Finn Balor, but a reuniting Shield prevented that from happening as well. Eventually, Strowman announced ahead of time he was cashing in at Hell in a Cell against Roman. And unfortunately for Strowman, this match would go down as a no contest after interference from Lesnar, marking the first time a cash-in attempt had no winner. In 2019, for the second time in 3 years, Charlotte Flair would be on the receiving end of a cash-in. And also for the second time in 3 years, a women's Money in the Bank winner would cash in on the same night, as Bayley would cash in on her former 4 Horsewoman cohort Charlotte Flair. This also had the unique circumstances too, as this would mark 3 women's championship matches in a row for the first time in company history, as Becky defended her Raw Championship against Lacey Evans, then lost the SmackDown Championship against Charlotte, and then Bayley cashed in on Charlotte after that. Lesnar would be a surprise entrant in the 2019 match and would eventually cash in successfully on Seth Rollins at Extreme Rules 2 months later. While the surprise entrant was groan-inducing for many fans alike, it did spark the beginning of Lesnar's fun character work that would start with his Brock Party gimmick. Before we discuss the most unique Money in the Bank match in WWE history, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification so you can stay up to date with new content just like this. And if you haven't already, hit the like button as well, as that is the easiest way for your fellow wrestling fans to find this video. Money in the Bank 2020 would give us arguably one of the most bizarre events in the company's history. As many of us would like to forget, the pandemic was at its worst around the time of the event, forcing the event behind closed doors as no venue was taking risks at the time. Unless a hardcore championship or 24/7 championship matches occurred there, it would be the first time a match would be held at WWE headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut. It's incredibly bizarre and has to be watched to truly understand. It's the first and only time the men's and women's matches happen simultaneously, and the winner would have to get to the roof of the building and retrieve the briefcase there. Asuka and Otis both won the briefcases during this event and had some very bizarre stories to accompany them. For Asuka, it was real life that got involved, as the following night on Raw, Becky came out with the briefcase and invited Asuka out. Becky announced that the match wasn't for a title match in the future, but actually for the Raw Women's Championship. She opened the briefcase and inside was the title belt itself. Becky told Asuka and the world at this time that she was pregnant and Asuka was now the Raw Women's Champion. For Otis, he was forced to defend the briefcase against The Miz, and for the second time ever, the Money in the Bank briefcase changed hands. And like the other person who won the briefcase outside of the ladder match, Edge, Miz cashed in after an Elimination Chamber match by defeating Drew McIntyre in February 2021. In 2021, the world was trying to claw its way back to normalcy. WWE held WrestleMania 37 in Florida with precautions in place, and they were allowed to have fans in attendance for the first time since going to the Thunderdome, albeit in a limited capacity. However, this essentially was a one-off at the time, and it wasn't until a few months later at Money in the Bank where WWE would no longer look back, as fans were welcomed in full capacity for a premium live event for the first time in a couple of years. The 2021 event saw Nikki Cross, then known as Nikki A.S.H, win the briefcase, and she would go on to defeat perennial champion Charlotte Flair for the title on an episode of Raw. The men's side would see Big E finally get his big moment, as he would win the briefcase and would eventually go on to successfully cash in against Bobby Lashley, also on an episode of Raw, marking the first time both briefcases were cashed in on television events in the same year. 2022's event would see the third time out of 5 possible times that a woman would cash in her briefcase the same night she won it. Liv Morgan rolled Ronda Rousey up the same night she won the briefcase after a match against Natalya, giving Liv Morgan her very first championship reign. As for the men, it would mark the very first time for some unknown reason that a superstar would challenge for a non-world championship. In hindsight, this makes even less sense as to what happened, but let's start with the winner, and that is Austin Theory. Theory was being groomed on air as Vince McMahon's chosen one. At the time of Theory's eventual cash-in, Vince was no longer involved in creative or working for WWE in an official capacity, as he had stepped down and claimed retirement amidst the allegations he had been accused of over the years. So while this may have not been the initial plan, what ended up happening is Theory cashing in for the United States Championship, marking the very first time someone cashed in on a non-world title. He would go on to add his name to the list of failed cash-ins, as Bobby Lashley would get involved in the finish, giving Rollins the opening to hit the curb stomp and successfully defend the US title. Nearly 20 years later, we have seen some very memorable cash-ins due to the Money in the Bank briefcase, and we have seen superstars born before our very eyes as a result of that concept. It's added an exciting wrinkle to every championship match when a briefcase is in play. And when that briefcase is held on for a while and become forgotten, it can create a truly surprising moment when the briefcase holder's music hits. Some fans would mark particular cash-ins as their favorite moments in wrestling history. Seth Rollins, Edge, and CM Punk are often cited as having among the top cash-ins in the company's history, and all 3 of their cases it helps solidify their status as main event players going forward. As we look towards the 2023 event, as of this video's posting, we have the following names involved in Money in the Bank matches in London. For the women, we have Zelina Vega, Becky Lynch, Zoe Stark, Bayley, and Io Sky, with one more to be determined. Much like I've made note that Io should have beaten Bianca at Backlash for the title, I'm saying the same thing right here, in that Io Sky should get the briefcase. It's long past overdue that we get to Io's babyface run and the breakup of Damage Control, and having Io win the briefcase is an easy stepping stone to get there. Io is truly one of WWE's most incredible in-ring performers, not just on the women's side, but in the entire company. And I believe we're going to see Triple H give Io the well-deserved push her fans have been longing for. On the men's side, thus far we have Ricochet, Shinsuke Nakamura, LA Knight, Santos Escobar, Butch, and either Matt Riddle or Damian Priest. This is honestly a far harder match for me to decide who will end up winning, as I think all are decent choices to take the briefcase home. LA Knight is the fan favorite here to take it, and he just may do so, and I think that would be the right move, but there's a chance to make a main event level star out of Knight, Escobar, Butch, and Priest out of this match, and Triple H is being given a great problem trying to decide the winner of this match. Whoever wins the 2023 editions of Money in the Bank, one thing is for sure, and that is the match is still doing what it was designed to do nearly 20 years ago. And that is to create the next big star for the company, and in both the men's and women's matches, you are being given the opportunity once more. The matches provide some insane and memorable moments, and while it hasn't been all hits and have had its fair share of misses, it's provided a platform for the next big superstars more often than not. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button, as that'll help more fans of the Money in the Bank ladder match find this video just like you did. And of course, subscribe to us for more content just like this every single Sunday. And while you're clicking things, also drop us a comment with your favorite Money in the Bank cash-in of all time. I would love to hear all of your opinions. I'm proud to say that after last week's video where we touted that we're just over the 150 subscriber mark, we have added a staggering 500 plus cents, sending us nearly 700 subscribers in less than 7 days. I cannot thank you guys enough for the incredible support we've seen already on this channel. We do our Sunday Primetime PTW video every single week, but we also post shorts and other wrestling related content throughout the week here and there, so like I said, make sure the bell notification is on so you know when those drop. Once again, thank you all for your support, and we will catch you on the next one.